I don't know if it was just winter being a mixed bag, but spring feels like a welcome breath of fresh air. But that could just be because I finally made my way out of my basement dwelling just long enough to get a glimpse of sunlight. Oh no, scratch that. It was just the light of my computer monitor. You know what that means. New shows to fill the empty void clawing at our souls. But I obviously had to get a roster for that. So I used my usual method, flooding the TikTok algorithm with shows, until members of Congress started pressing the CEO why it was showing up on their feeds. And I got a hell of a roster, while outing a few on national television too. Welcome to the fold. Tengoku Daimakyou looks like our future if ChatGPT grows unchecked. Yamada-kun to level Q Haku Kyuju no Koyo Suru is the reason why you never date your guildmates personified. Boku no Kokoro no Yabai Yatsu questions why the yandere trope never works out when the genders are reversed. Isekai still won't die, and Tensei Kizoku no Isekai Boukenroku is just adding to the reasons why euthanasia should be legalized. My home hero teaches us how to get away with murder. Isekai wa Smartphone Totomo ni Season 2 is... no. It's another case of not touching that with a 10-foot pole, considering it's everything I hate about Isekai wrapped into a shoddy package. Already have one of those this season. We're just dropping all pretenses with I got a cheat skill in another world, and became unrivaled in the real world too, and fully embracing the wish fulfillment by using Isekai to beat up bullies. Dr. Stone is back to cram more science lessons just dangerous enough to cause bodily harm into a friendly, imitatable package. Watashi no Yuri wa Oshigoto desu stole the premise of my entire YouTube channel. Yuusha ga Shinda inspires your next D&D campaign, with a necromancer cramming a soul into the hero's dead body to save their adventure. Distilling the internet zeitgeist into anime form, Kawaii Sugi Crisis has an alien playing with cats all day. Tonikaku Kawaii is back for Season 2 of Married Life with baby aliens. Maho Shoujo Magical Destroyers tries to salvage something better left dead, and that's my entire reason to exist. Every mangaka's dream comes true in Otonari ni Ginga, where the guy has a girl all over him for no fucking reason. Isekai Shokan wa Nidome desu is our second helping of Isekai when I'm not even asking for a first. UFO Table wasn't satisfied with only 2 smash hit seasons, so they're ready to monopolize the internet again for a third time with Kimetsu no Yaiba's latest outing. Korea wasn't letting Japan hog Isekai all to itself, and Kanojo ga Koshakute ni Itaryu has a girl dying just to reincarnate and probably die again as its main hook. Lead-In Films takes aim with Kimi wa Hokago Insomnia for another romance series. Oshinoko asks how to make an Oedipus complex seem more palatable to a mainstream audience. And lastly, my boy Boji's back in Osama ranking. This is certainly a hell of a roster, and we only have a single video to get through them all. So let's get on into it. First up is Heavenly Delusion, and this one has a lot of promise. So in the not so distant future, kids are living in a walled off section of a city, raised by robots. But if you are itching to get out and explore the ruins on the other side, so they can maybe find out what heaven really is. There's not a lot to this description, but it sets us up for a journey of self-discovery and a bit of philosophy wrapped in a sci-fi package. The hook for this one hits pretty hard within the first few minutes of the anime, as it shows what the kids' daily lives are like behind the wall with machines, how mundane and sterile it is, but then transitions to the sprawling outside full of danger and discovery. It contrasts the confined futuristic space with dilapidated backdrops covered in vegetation. There's a sort of narrative beauty in the solitude and grandeur conveyed as the two leads explore the ruins of modern Japan. They're likable goofballs full of emotion, out seeking their own motives, and it drips with organic storytelling as the plot unfolds through conversation and environmental details. If I had to pin it down, it reminds me of The Last of Us, sharing a lot in terms of tone and setting with that series, and that's definitely praise. As for animation, Production IG did a great job with this first episode, with amazing environmental art, a strong sense of direction that makes us understand how small and out of place the two leads are, and a few shots that are extremely well done. The fight scene in particular was well executed with flashy animation and well choreographed movements. This was a strong start to the season, and definitely one to check out. Next up is my love story with Yamada-kun at level 999. A girl is dating this guy who got her into a game, but it turns out that even nerds can cheat on you when you least expect it, because soon she finds herself updating her relationship status to dumped, which sucks, so she decides to take out her frustration on some enemies in-game. That's when she bumps into her guildmate Yamada. He's a pretty standard antisocial jerk from any MMO, but for whatever reason, she finds herself drawn to him and tries to break down the icy walls around Yamada's heart. So yeah, It's a pretty normal romance series with an added twist to appeal to the target demographic. Contrary to our last entry, this one gives away everything in its description, so you're well aware of what you're getting with this anime, a rebound romance between a college girl and a high school boy that's on the wrong side of creepy. As for what it offers, it has fairly solid humor, a cast of plug-and-play characters that bounce off one another well, and a semblance of a plot that holds them together, so it's fairly competent. The fact this cold dude has no experience with romance, is hot, despite his attitude actually cares about people, is what makes this girl end up gravitating towards him. So it's not just out of nowhere like it would imply. Madhouse is handling this one, and as a studio, they generally have a good track record for animation. The character designs do feel a bit lanky, but it's not ugly or anything, so I'm fine with it. It plays up the lighthearted nature of the narrative through its animation, which feels a bit awkward considering the first episode opens with a pretty harsh breakup scene. But ultimately it fits with the tone of the series moving forward. Hell, it even has some fairly artistic shots. The soft, bright colors and more exaggerated cutesy art works for making you relate to the cast. The rather goofy looking models mixed with the slightly higher effort framing and animation for the in-game segments fits as part of the comedy too, so it's charming. Overall, it's a fairly safe rom-com that's sure to be enjoyable for people into these sort of shows. Speaking of love that's doomed to fail, we've got the dangers in my heart next. A guy who seems like a pretty average middle school kid has one burning desire, and it's to kill all of his classmates, as any mentally unstable edgelord does. But one girl in particular seems to be the focus of all these fantasies, and that's the popular girl in his class. But while spending time in the library, she starts bugging him more and more, and the two form a sort of friendship leading to this urge to kill her, turning into something hopefully a bit more innocent, because I don't think it's supposed to be that kind of show. Well, it kind of is, at least it fantasizes about it. Honestly, it's on the edgier side as this guy indulges in his sick, twisted fantasies, and tries to hold himself back with all the elegance of a Chuni weeb sealing his dark power behind an eye patch. The loner edgelord dynamic combined with the popular girl's more ditzy, slobbish private personality as he warms up to her makes this show much more entertaining than it has any right to be. As for the animation, nothing amazing. There's definitely more effort put into the first episode, with lighting to juxtapose the two leads' personalities, mostly competent artwork, but ultimately nothing to write home about as even when it's trying to be flashier, it's using some close-ups and stark lighting to add punch. In essence, it feels like it's gonna fall off after a few episodes fairly hard. This is a studio that mostly handles weekly children's programming like Grand Shinchan and Doraemon, so I don't really have high hopes. If you're looking for some edgier humor and romantic subtext, this might be up your alley. Keeping with shows I expect to fall flat on their face, let's look at the Aristocrat's Otherworldly adventure. Joe, any teenager, dies trying to save some girls, ends up as a noble in some fantasy world with his memory still intact, and is blessed by the gods because why the hell not? So now he's gonna do the usual Isekai thing and become the center of that entire world, with his amazing power and probably form a harem too. Why not? Sky's the limit. It's not like this has any originality to resist such a tired trope. So you wanna know why I didn't watch season 2 of Smartphone? It's because I can't really tell it apart from this. Yeah, they're both pretty much the same. The first minute of this had me dying laughing due to how over the top it is. The problem was it's not even trying to be funny. If you regularly watch seasonal anime, this hand-wavy sort of isekai with a quick death of the protag and immediately embracing his new life with rushed character introductions, generic fantasy worlds, and power fantasies aplenty is so commonplace, you can probably recite these story beats before they even happen due to how common it is. The art is incredibly polished, bright, but also incredibly simplistic and not much to write home about. Yeah, it's beyond standard, if not a little confusing, due to how the characters don't really mesh together, feeling like they're from different series entirely. It's pretty obvious this is gonna be a low-effort anime to drum up some light novel sales for a mediocre series, but whether this will turn out to be mindlessly entertaining junk food is really the only avenue left, and I'm not really banking on it, as there's stiff competition for Isekai this season. Well, we're really off to a morbid start this time, since next is my home hero. So a pretty average salaryman finds out his daughter's boyfriend is abusing her, so he decides to go check out this guy for himself. He quickly realizes he's in a gang and in over his head. This dude's plan seems to be extort money from her grandparents' inheritance, and there's a really good chance he'll just kill her afterwards, since his previous girlfriends all ended up dead too. Not great. So our boy decides to strike first, and just off this piece of trash, and and is now living life looking over his shoulder to protect his family from the aforementioned mob. The description really feels like it could have been the story in its entirety, but hey, that's what they felt comfortable enough giving away as a teaser, so where does it go from there? Well, it's a different sort of anime from what we're used to, since it's a drama and suspense story, and I'll give it this, the core premise is interesting, but ultimately it's handled in a kinda clumsy way. A few too many convenient phone calls and conversations overheard in public, dumb luck, just a lot of jumping around the timeline that really serves no purpose. The art direction uses fairly rough line work and a darker, dull color palette to sell the mood, and I like that. But there's definitely a separation between the characters and background, giving this a cheap feel. When in motion, it's on the clunkier side too, and the direction isn't doing it any favors. I felt the camera angles were pretty plain, and did little to build the suspense this series is going for. I was hoping for a solid series, but it's certainly lacking in execution, and I don't really see it shaping up. Let's stay with the shitty world theme, because next we have I got a cheat skill in another world and became unrivaled in the real world too. A boy who was bullied all his life suddenly has a door open to another world for him, and he jumps right on that. But what he finds out is, whatever awesome crap he finds on the other side of that isekai doorway, he can bring it on back to Earth with him. So, no drawbacks whatsoever, I see. Looking at this in practice, we can see that this guy, despite being bullied, has a strong moral compass and good heart. In that way, we want to see him succeed. Though it definitely feels like this world's exaggerated to be as cruel as it is in this franchise to really make you feel for him, it at least has me invested in this dude more so than other isekai protagonists. There's definitely a sense that we'll see his life turn around after his isekai makeover, and with how closely tied he is to his original world, means we'll see him experience that change. The studio behind this one is Millipensi, and that should be an immediate red flag for anyone. These are the people who gave us the latest Berserk series, Copcraft, and So I'm a Spider, So What's adaptation. None of those are bad on a story level, but they all share really janky CG and animation that makes them look awful in comparison to other franchises using similar amounts of 3D animation. In terms of how this looks in the first episode, the art isn't awful, the eyes and character designs are really striking, but watching things in motion gives a clear hint how much they cut corners here. There's times it has a cheap net animation feel, as they're using post-production movements on wider camera shots and scene layering to make the series feel more animated than it really is. Especially with how separate from the environments the characters are, it feels amateurish with some shots. This will be a series that lives or dies on its story, and how well it executes that's going to be a key factor. But this first episode certainly has me interested. We've been practically drowning in continuations, and Dr. Stone is back this season with its long-awaited follow-up. Where the first season got us acquainted with the world and characters, season 2 wrapped up the pivotal war between Bronze and Brains, leading to a somewhat redemption for the villain of the arc, but ultimately gearing us up for the next leg of this journey. And I really enjoy what Dr. Stone offers as a gateway to what makes science and technology so revolutionary, while using it as a springboard to showcase a rather optimistic plot about relaunching civilization from square one, with many science lessons, funny humor as people react to the insanity of creating electricity in a steam engine in a Stone Age setting, and an interesting sort of role reversal in hero and villain tropes, making for a unique presentation. How does this season hold up to these expectations? If you've been watching to this point, it's on par with previous seasons in terms of animation quality, and the story is at a good launching point after the Hour special aired last summer. Dr. Stone is a solid non-fighting based shonen series, so if you're not watching, this is a good excuse to get caught up. Things have been a little lacking in the degeneracy department for my taste, so let's check out Yuri Is My Job Next, which is shockingly descriptive myself too. So a shallow girl whose dream is to become a trophy wife of a billionaire ends up hurting a girl who works at a cafe and has to take her place as she recovers. The hook here is the cafe is staffed entirely by women and uses an all-girls academy theme. And I've seen enough visual novels of questionable repute to know where this is going. While most workers have accepted her, there's one who hasn't, and she's worried that this girl's seen through her perfect facade. Though that shoujo eye tag has me suspecting otherwise. This series is basically Yuri bait taken to the extreme, as it makes it the entire premise and punchline that these girls act like they're in love for their customers' sake. It plays up shoujo and Yuri manga tropes for humor in a sort of cringy way that pokes fun at the genres, so it teases the audience with what they want, but works in comedy to give you more of a reason to watch outside of some blue balls. The flavor of that humor is mostly aimed at its own characters, and commentary on the situations they end up in from their perspectives. And to that end, the cast are all a fairly likable, though jaded group who plays roles distinct from their personal lives. And I like how it all plays out. The animation isn't exactly amazing, but the art direction does stand out with incredibly cute models and vibrant pastel colors to make a visually pleasing experience for the audience, even using some sparkling abstract backgrounds and flowery imagery as tropes from shoujo manga as part of its punchlines. I think this one will definitely be a fun comedy to pull in the more degenerate weebs, so people like myself. I think we can stick with degeneracy for a little bit longer and look at the legendary hero is dead. A few years back, the hero sealed away the Demon Lord's portal that allowed him and his armies into the human world. But that seal wasn't perfect, and now it's starting to break down. But while the hero is once again heading out to confront the demons, a random pervy farmer decides to protect his village with some traps, and the hero ends up walking right into one. Well, this isn't anything a necromancer can't fix, and she stuffs the farmer's soul into the hero's body so he can finish the job himself. Fan service and non sequitur gags pretty much fill this series' runtime, and it's all handled in a very hand-wavy sort of way, without much for stakes. Which means there's not much I can really hang on this series if it's not going to take itself seriously, but ultimately it doesn't have much faith in what it brings to the table. Some shows can pull off the absurd level of escalation in jokes well, but this one rushes to the next crazy thing before we even really have a chance to process the joke. So, quantity over quality here. The art and animation for this one feel almost quaint, like it's stuck in a time warp of the mid-2000s, with its more stiff models and skimpy over-designed outfits. The flow of events even feels like a shonen show from that era as well. Don't go into this expecting any sort of good fantasy or action. It's purely a gag manga that got a quick and dirty adaptation. If you're looking for some raunchy, dark, or dumb comedy this season, I guess this could satisfy your itch. Whoa, what are you all doing here? Is it that time already? Halfway through the video, huh? That can only mean one thing. Either you just got an ad break, or were lucky enough to miss it. Or that you have an ad blocker, I guess. Moving on. Let's look at 2 Cute Crisis. An alien happens upon Earth and decides it looked at her funny and deserves to be destroyed. But it'd be a shame to just wipe it out when there's so much interesting stuff to try on at first. So she does just that. But her first stop just so happens to be a cat cafe, where she realizes what most internet videos could have told her, that cats are cute as hell. She devotes the rest of her life to loving them as a result. Yeah, another cute comedy anime with a quirky premise that's not exactly outlandish enough to be over the top. In terms of plot, it's pretty much spelled out within the first 5 minutes, and plateaus so it can focus on the main thing here. Catsploitation. You like someone freaking out about how cute animals are for 24 minutes? This is pretty much just that with cats and other pets. I can't exactly say why you should watch this over scrolling social media for cat videos, because they both look the same to me. The art and animation both land on the lower end of average, with fairly stiff models, slow delivery, and flat colors giving a pretty mediocre showing overall. Honestly, the background art and characters feel like they're from different worlds entirely, based on the level of detail and lighting, and that's sort of distracting at times. If you're hardcore into cats, maybe check this out, but if you were hoping for a more comedic story about an alien experiencing our collective cat fixation, you'll be disappointed. Well, let's keep the cute train rolling then, with Tonikaku Kawaii's Season 2. This blew up the internet a few years ago, when it took a look at rom-coms and decided to actually go for that whole relationship thing, by centering itself around a young married couple despite them barely knowing each other, as they hash out the whole life thing. And for that, it's a fairly laid-back show with goofy comedy that's meant to be over the top. What seems to keep viewers in for the long haul here is not so much how this romance works, but more who this girl really is, as her life doesn't really seem to add up when you run the numbers, though the romance is definitely the glue that holds that together. And the real question is, how does this season hold up to that legacy, and does it improve? Well, it certainly picks up from where it left off, with promises of answering some of the questions lingering over this series. The core cast has a great dynamic, and the innocent love story playing out is still an enjoyable watch. So if you skipped the first season, I would say rectify that, and catch up on one of the more entertaining rom-coms that's been out recently, one that puts the romance before the comedy. Rom-coms are great and all, but let's break away from all the lighthearted and gag shit with magical girl destroyers. In a post-apocalyptic future where otaku culture is wiped out, freeing us from our collective shackles, a lone hero fights to bring back degeneracy along with his magical girl groupies. Wait, are we sure this isn't a dumb gag series? It's honestly kind of hard to say what this is, because it's devoting itself to being over the top in every regard, embracing the silly premise to get the fullest out of this franchise, in a pretty similar way to what Trigger does with their work, playing the absurdity straight and letting the resulting chaos be the punchline. I mean, the level of sincerity is refreshing, but what is this besides just embracing itself? Well, a series that packs action, dystopian hellscapes, and themes of rebellion against an oppressive government into an off-the-wall package that delivers laughs despite the story taking the lead. The characters are all stereotypes here, and their struggles aren't exactly motivating, and that makes this one feel a bit hollow. The animation is bombastic, letting loose to give exaggerated movements and cartoonish fights in a way that's engaging, but the art doesn't really back that up like other studios do. I compared this earlier to a Trigger work, and you get the sense that it was inspired by that studio and how it's delivered, but the style definitely isn't there, feeling more like an imitation than an homage. So the spectacle is there, but not the heart. Ultimately, it feels like a series that's more dumb fun than anything else, and I mean that's fine, but if you were hoping for more, prepare yourself to be disappointed. I need something a bit more grounded, so let's look at A Galaxy Next Door. You know, a series about a mangaka and aliens. A guy's dad died, leaving him a small inheritance, an apartment complex, and to raise his younger siblings by himself. I mean, he's doing alright, I guess, trying to save money for their college education, and he's lucky enough to be a mangaka, living the dream of tight deadlines and responsibilities. But he's really up shit's creek when his assistants quit out of nowhere to further their own careers. It is until a new one shows up and is amazing as hell. But after some accidental physical contact, she declares them engaged and he finds out she's actually from outer space. Well damn, that escalated quickly. Yeah, we're dealing with another romance story, but this one's more of a relaxed pace, rather than hitting hard with the comedy. And what it delivers is a pretty competent, comfy show about a family trying to get by. No cringy otaku shit here. The characters are all sweet, if not a little plain, but that definitely adds to the grounded feel. I appreciate the kids being less of a plot device or annoyance, and more like an actual facet of this dude's life. And despite their rough circumstances, they're still living their lives. The animation was, hell, I'll just say it, extremely average. And considering the studio doesn't usually go above and beyond, I'm not expecting much. This is Asahi Productions, most recently known for Peach Boy Riverside and Doll's Front Line. So don't get too excited. I'm not really expecting a ton from this, and that may honestly work in its favor. If you're desperate for a slower paced romance show, this might do it for you. I almost made it out, but goddammit, Isekai just doesn't quit. So now I'm stuck looking at Summoned to Another World for a second time, which is exactly what's on the tin. A guy got summoned to another world, saved the day, got blown to a different version of modern Japan where he had to start over as a baby, except once he's in high school again, he gets summoned back to the same world for a second time to save it all again. So is this just gonna be our typical isekai? You know, I'd really like to hope not, because with that premise, I'd like to have seen a mixture of Shield Hero's anger and Cautious Hero's self-awareness, but no. Guess what? It's just another isekai. If most isekai franchises are a snake eating their own tail, this one feels like a hydra, because it plucked a ton of different tropes and ideas from other popular series, and smashed them all together in what could have been an interesting premise, but ultimately feels hollow due to its poor execution. Generic fantasy world characters and a plot that we've seen a million times already. Hell, this dude's seen it already too. How's the animation? Completely lacking. Like there's not much weight to these actions, and everything's framed in a fairly plain way, with dead-on shots so the animators didn't have to think about perspective. On top of that, the line work is muddy, the color choice feels more in line with a slice of life series, and really it's just not super detailed in the first place. That's when I noticed Studio L's name was attached to this, and suddenly I got flashbacks to GBet, and realized I was most likely in for a fucking mess. Okay, there's not a ton of great isekai out this season, but this would probably be towards the bottom of a list of things to grab, unless you're somehow not sick of Otherworld anime already. Don't know how that's possible. How can I even talk about Kimetsu no Yaiba again? It's the third season, still with the same studio, so you know it's gonna steal the show again, making everyone talk about how it's peak anime. Well, we kick things off with an hour episode, entering us into a pretty pivotal arc in the series. All to build excitement as the quest to cure Tanjiro's sister continues. This time we're seeing the blacksmith village. As with the death of one of the fabled upper moons from last season, we're bound to see more on the move with some tense fights. But how does this hold up compared to last? Fairly well, I must say, as the story hits the ground running by dropping the deep lore, with art and animation that keep up what we've come to expect. Well, it is UFO table, so that's pretty much a given. This is one of the few studios that has effectively mastered CG in anime, and the series looks amazing when combining that with their stellar traditional animation. If you're somehow not watching this yet, that's hard to believe for anyone who's remotely into battle shonen. This is an extremely well done adaptation of an otherwise mediocre manga, where the anime overshadows the source by a wide margin, and definitely worth a watch. Isekai is so damn infectious, it's even spreading to Korean media at this point, and the reason why Raeliana ended up at the Duke's mansion is my foray into this intersection of genres. So when a girl dies in modern day Korea, she suddenly finds herself in the body of a certain plot device in a murder mystery novel she was fond of. She really ain't about to let herself die again, and tries to save her own life armed with her knowledge by getting in with the novel's protagonist. Except he's not really a great guy either. So this definitely stands out, due to the fact it's not like every other isekai on the market, since it's a romance story with less of the standard fantasy and more of a character focus. The girl's entire goal is to avoid fate since she was screwed over in her last life after being murdered, so she's not exactly looking forward to that happening again. The cast is relatable, but how she's pretty much just an average person trying to get her relationship ended works in this one's favor, by adding some comedic moments and an air of desperation. Art-wise, it has a style, which is always a bonus, as I'm of the thought that studios that try and separate their works visually by making them more memorable is better than just going with generic designs. This one utilizes rougher line work that's reminiscent of a sketchbook, and that shows in the backgrounds more so than the characters, but they still feel as though they belong together. I like how it contrasts that fantasy world with the line work and brighter colors, compared to the darker and crisp modern Korea, as a subtle way to transport the audience. The direction is on point too, using nice match shots and perspective to tell the story visually, so I'm definitely feeling this anime more so than the others out this season. I'm looking forward to how this one plays out. I feel like romance has been dominating this season, but fuck me if that isn't better than isekai. So let's roll into Insomniacs After School. Two Insomniacs end up bumping into one another at their school's observatory and hit it off, taking naps during the day when skipping class, and hanging out at night. And judging by that romance tag, we're looking at a lot more than a friendship. This is honestly a fairly well done story with characters who feel three-dimensional, because even though the main guy's a grouch, he's got friends that can hold a conversation. Hell, he's even got a sense of humor. And the fact that these two, who are in the same class and barely know each other, bond over their shared problem is a good setup, which ultimately leads into solid chemistry, because their relationship doesn't seem centered around this shared secret, but more like it was sparked by it. I have high hopes for this series. The intro is fairly cinematic in its execution, with great music underscoring excellent shot choices to tell less of a story and more of a mood, though the main animation does seem fairly plain. I think this does a good job at hooking us into the core cast though. Two people with struggles of their own who feel like outcasts, making an important connection with one another. Lead-In Films is handling this with a first-time director, so this could really swing either way, but considering the first episode we got, I'm leaning more towards this being on the better side. If you're hurting for a romance among the abundant offerings this season, you could definitely do a lot worse than this. Wait a minute, we have a reincarnated story without the other world? I definitely have to check it out then, so let's get into Oshinoko, picking up with I Shit You Not, an hour-and-a-half first episode to kick it off. So a doctor is a big fan of this one teenage idol who's suddenly pregnant, and she comes into his clinic for service, because he's out in the sticks. So while she's under his care for a while, he ends up in a freak accident that costs him his life. Yeah, a freak accident caused by her stalker. Who'd have thought? But that's not the end of this story. He finds himself reincarnated as her new baby. Well, one of them. She had twins. So now he and his little sister, who's also reincarnated, are out to protect their mom/favorite idol's smile through the absolute hell that is showbiz. Looking at what we actually get here, it's a fairly strong series with a compelling cast. It has a bit of absurdity baked in, but definitely not enough to distract from what we're actually getting. While our two main leads might seem like gross otakus, there's actually quite a bit of reasoning behind why they are that way, and it's also kinda what makes these two pretty relatable. Understanding a bit about Japanese culture helps too, as it enlightens you about I struggle, because you know a young popular Japanese idol now getting pregnant, that generally mean her career is over if word got out that she has kids. So really there's a lot of shitty things happening in this series to otherwise decent people, leading to some cosmic coincidences that create a really strong drama and mystery series about how fucked up the entertainment industry really is. Hell, it helps a lot that the cast are pretty upbeat and good people too, as it makes you feel for them when this horrible shit really hits the fan. The end of this first episode is one of the more powerful moments in anime I've seen in recent years. Hey, I get to talk about a studio as a positive for once in this video, and I'm pleased to see Dogo Kobo's name on this franchise. With their track record for solid animation work and adaptations, this is definitely in good hands. This is our bright introduction to an otherwise dark look at Japan's entertainment industry, and how our cast supports one another will be the anchor that keeps it all together. This has my interest for sure. Let's wrap this up on what I'm hoping is an extra high note by looking at my boy Boji's triumphant return. Osama Ranking is a series about a prince born from two giants whose father stole his strength and hearing so he could become the strongest in the world. But after his death, that led to his boy venturing out to find his own source of strength. That way he could overthrow his half-brother who stole the throne. It takes a lot of inspiration from fairy tales in its design and structure, creating a visually distinct series that tells a story that seems light on first impression, but packs a lot of dark themes into an otherwise bright and optimistic package. The characters all have motives that break from the typical mold and are more rounded than initially presented. I hold this franchise in pretty high regard, and I was excited to see it get a second season. However, this isn't it. No, instead this is a collection of side stories and is pretty disappointing as a result, mostly because wherever these take place in the series, we already know the outcome of it, and that just means it's kinda pointless, especially since the characters were like, fleshed out enough already. If you're dying for that sort of content, I mean, this is okay, but if you were looking for more of Osama Ranking's story, this isn't it. Sorry to say. So that's it. Spring 2023 is looking pretty decent overall. Despite the abundance of romance and isekai, there's more than a few shows here that have my interest, between reincarnated pop stars solving a mystery, post-apocalyptic adventure, and even some straight absurdist series that could prove entertaining. But comment below, tell me what you're looking forward to this season. I'd love to hear it. For now though, hey, you've made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and do all the other YouTube stuff to help the channel grow. You can also join my Discord with a link down in the description. And if you really want to support me, you can head on over to my Patreon and pick up some extra perks. And speaking of Patreon, I'd like to give a special thanks to HonorWolf01, Robin DBL, and Shriken for their continued support. Thanks for watching.